Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Scaling Smarter. I am Ali Taylor from Wisdom and Wayfinder, and here is my co-host, Frank Maiorana from JustWorks. How's it going today, Frank?
It's going great, Ali. How are you?
Good. I had to restart my computer a couple times just to be able to connect my microphone and the camera and all that. So
So
I think it's pretty
you said you've
fitting.
been having IT problems. Is that?
Yes, yeah. And you were having some as well before we were getting on. So
Yep.
I don't know if that's a harbinger of things to come, but I think it's a perfect way to segue into our guest today, Jack Watkinson from Outsource My IT. He's currently phoning in from a convention or exhibit. Is that what's going on, Frank? Jack?
Yeah, we are at the New Jersey State Bar Convention, and they have, I think, last year about 3,000 people in attendance for this whole thing. And there's a lot of stuff around AI and cybersecurity, so it's a great spot for us to actually be as a vendor instead of the attendee for once.
Yeah, nice. Well, we appreciate you making the time. I know we're kind of playing things by ear, trying to get you make sure that you can still attend today. So I appreciate you making the time and carving that out for us. All right, cool. Well, let's jump into the conversation today. Again, we're talking about creating a IT strategy for scaling small businesses. Obviously, AI is the forefront of everybody's mind. But before we dive into that, can we just talk about just some of the basic things that people should know about IT and really what is it? Like, what do people think it is, and what is it actually for their business?
I think, I had a really good conversation that I think kind of leads into this somewhere today. They decided to go out on their own, right? And they left the big business, tons of people, they had departments, and then they go out and they realize that I don't have any of them. So from the resources, they're now trying to figure out where technology gives them the ability to have departments, make use of this. You also want to already start developing SOPs. If you're a solopreneur, you still want to have the way to do things, because if you want to have your first, second, third, 50th employee, you always want to have ways of doing it. Continue to look at how do you expand. I also think when it comes to technology, like with this woman, it's really easy for her to get overwhelmed, but if you got to simplify it to scale it. And that's the other thing with technology. Even with AI, I think it's simple, not easy, but it needs to be approached in a way that you have it has to be, or you won't be able to kind of get to a higher level. If it's so hard that you can't use the tools, then it's not going to make it so you can have someone else do it. You kind of can become, as we've talked about, you're bottlenecking yourself at that point.
Yeah.
And same thing with person. You might not be at a spot where you're using a bookkeeper, using these other things. Maybe that's your someday when you grow and scale, but for the time being, you're reliant on what systems, what process you have. And I also love that conversation for a startup attorney who broke off from another firm and saying, hey, listen, what is the best way for you on the ground to not have their big challenge with attorneys that we solve is how much time are they spending on non-billable activities and not things like where they're going to dinners. Those are always revenue generating activities. But if you're spending too much time, you're going to have to spend time. There's not one attorney I know that spends 100% of their time on billable activities, but there's a diminishing return line. And that's where you look at your systems, processes, your technology. Before you even get to the security side of everything, are you able to make it that you're getting the most out of every day and week, and it's not becoming a frustration for you? You're not doing repetitive tasks. You're not doing things that I had someone today said they're just typing a Word document for creating a contract. I was like, well, that's better than handwriting, I suppose, but not by much. So I think building from the ground up, I think that's where a lot of we look at the tools and resources. Same thing. I talked to them about CRM and tools of that nature, because same thing. You can't work out of Excel and you can't scale it that way. It'll get overwhelming and you'll just let things fall through the cracks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love what you said about breaking things down to like their most simple pieces, and then trying to scale from there. Because if you try to scale on top of complexity or chaos, right, you're just creating bigger, more expensive problems for yourself down the line.
Yeah. And it doesn't. I think one of my favorite, figures of speech is how do you eat an elephant, the one bite at a time. I think that applies to your tool. And you don't have to become a master of all areas of your business overnight, but you can figure out what's one area I can improve and kind of like, if you're trying to figure out, is it juggling plates for you or is it getting processes in place? Because juggling plates is really difficult. Even if you get really good at the first plate and adding a second plate, you're adding that. That's not what we want to go for here.
Yeah.
Is take one bite at a time, get good at this thing. Maybe for attorneys, you talk about what's your intake, right? What's the first step of them? And this goes for almost any business. What's the first point of contact they have with you? How do you capture the information so it's accurate and they already have a baseline, right? How do you manage that relationship? How do you keep them in your ecosystem? Even if you're a dentist, you want someone to have a good experience outside of just your ability as dentist and them in the chair. So they look at, how did your staff treat them? How did you remember their information? Was there any parts that seemed like a lot of work for them to do? Were you proactively checking back in with them, seeing how they're doing? What's your follow-up? These are all things that you can do in bite-sized chunks and figure out how the systems do that. What's your marketing? Is your marketing traditional like SEO and that kind of stuff? Is it networking? Or is it events like this? This in itself is a marketing strategy for us, but you can't do everything at one time. But even from here, we made a lead collector too. That's a simple QR code that someone fills out, and my goal is it had to take less than 15 seconds. Otherwise, people in New Jersey won't do that.
Yeah.
So it's funny, Jack, you talk about so much more than just what people think about IT. Like a lot of times when people think IT, they think my copiers, my printers, my connection, maybe where I'm storing my information. But you're really talking about really processes, and you're really talking about, well, how do I from a technology standpoint make my life a lot more efficient and make me a lot more profitable. A lot of times when we deal with small business owners, right, talk to them, and whether it's cybersecurity or just IT, they really don't necessarily have a budget identified. Often it becomes secondary. So when you're talking with a small business owner, where you start? I know you kind of start where they are, but what are some of the non-negotiables on your end that you're like, you need to get this in place before we start moving forward?
I think, I want to address the budget thing too. If you're trying to race to zero, I'm not going to meet you there.
Yeah.
So I think that's a starter for me, is that someone sees, just like you guys, you want to see some of that values or relationship and sees that as an investment, right? And I do the same thing here. And one thing that I've used recently that I've stolen from the Internet of Things is if you Google, you can now do it with ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, any of these things, so many ways. If you just look up what a good IT budget is, it'll tell you based off the percentage of your business. So a healthy IT budget is anywhere between 3 to 8% of the gross revenue of the business as part of your operations. For most of our clients, we cost less than 1%, but still you have people who are trying to find it cheaper. Cheaper at a certain rate is certainly not better, and it's definitely going to make things worse for you. And then, there are different levels to it too. Like if you're in medical and you have to adhere to HIPAA, you're going to have different rules. So we kind of I might be selling you a suit, but then I'm going to tailor it to you at that point. But at its base line, if someone is trying to find how to do it for $0 or nothing, then it's just not going to be a fit. If they can see how it costs 1%, but I can show them how to use the other 2, 3, whatever percent based off of their business goals. And this is where working with like an Ali of, okay, well, if you're going to make sure you have the right systems, processes, and CRM, you have the right people doing these things, well, that's where the overlap is too. So I handle the security part because simplicity helps from the protection side of everything. But without that, it's hard to put the foundation in place to really keep things going. So my non-negotiable is, really that someone sees it as technology as an investment, and they have an understanding that they're spending probably more than 1%. If you're really trying to, if you're $1 million business, that's $10,000. So that might be hard for an average person or employee to think about dropping $10,000. But for $1 million business that wants to get to, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, that number should be working capital. I mean, the strongest force in nature is compound interest, right? So you can do that still with the right systems and processes and investing in your business.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And where I was going with the zero budget was in that they're not spending on it today. Like they're in a situation where they're not investing, let's say, in cybersecurity, or they're not investing in these areas, right? Understanding it makes complete sense. Like you have to protect your business, you have to grow. It's part of scaling a business. And the question was geared towards like when you're when you're in that situation where you're starting from 0-1, is it cybersecurity that you address first? Is it like what are the things that business owner says, all right, well, as you mentioned, eating elephant one bite at a time, that first bite.
Yeah, where is that bite?
I do think I really think every business should have a baseline security just to make it so they can sleep at night. There's just too much criminal activity out there for people who think I'm too small, and security needs to match complexity. So, then again, a solopreneur might not have a ton of things in place, but they certainly should be looking to do better than like a Norton antivirus. But if that's the least they can do that. I still think there's value in that. Last year, cybercrime did almost $11 trillion with a T in damage. That'd be the same as 42 in LA wildfires. 46% of that was small to mid-sized businesses. I heard someone who had like a dog shelter. Really, it was a real genuine mom and pop kind of business, and they got hit with a ransomware attack. This is where there's got to be a baseline for this kind of stuff. But I think like you guys, I love education. So I'm always open to questions. I've had people that aren't ready for us yet from a business maturity, and I'll tell them which direction I would recommend them to go. And then when they get there, let me meet them with they already have a base, right? They already have some sort of foundation for me to work with. Even if I wasn't their day one IT, I can get them in the right direction. So when it comes to there, it's not more work for me or for them at that point, but they've done the part of keep themselves safe to get there. It's just too high risk to abandon security for operations. But it's one of those, I don't really think you can't do one without the other. But if I had to pick, I'd pick security, honestly. I think operations is something to work on and be progressive with it, but it's like leaving the keys in the car and just hoping no one steals it. Okay. Doesn't matter that you made a great engine. Not for someone else, it might. That's great. They're driving your car.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, which is a huge problem in Monmouth County for a while. People leaving the key fob either in the car or nearby, right, to be picked up by the scanners. But one of the things that we've had numerous conversations. Jack and I, we go back quite a bit. We've had a number of conversations, and we've often hear about how business owners will think like, oh, I'm too small for IT, or I don't need to worry about that just yet because it's just me, or it's just my small business, right? What are some of the ways that you would recommend we speak against that?
Jack, I think I talked to you.
Sorry, Holly.
All right.
Okay.
Oh,
I just raised someone else. You asked part of that question again. This is part of doing a live event and live stream at the same time. It's a challenge.
No, it's okay. If they want to come over and say hi,
friends,
we'd love to see the people that you're talking to as well.
It's okay. I'll let her talk to James.
Okay. No, the question was, oftentimes business owners, especially if they're getting started, or even if they've been around for a while, they often think that because the business is small, or they're not doing a lot of business, or they might take a credit card here and there over the phone, so they don't have to worry about a lot of the security and safety measures or cybersecurity protections or things like that. What do you say to people like that?
I mean, I could go on and on and on about some of the ways that criminal activity works too. I mean, they play a level up game sometimes too. So there was a story, I think I'll get mostly right here, where there's a small group. It's actually a U.S. based group that decided instead of doing their day jobs, they're going to try a cyber attack, right? So they decided to socially engineer, meaning they called and faked being someone else. They got a local business that they ransomed. They paid the ransom. So now that they had more money, this is like, imagine like evil Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
And that's what they were starting to do here. And after the first successful attack, they hit a bigger business. They paid. And I mean, criminals do crazy things where they'll ransom you and they'll be like, Ali, it'll be the exact amount of money in your bank account or exact like deposit you were expecting that week. The average criminal sits on your network for 6 months before they make an attack. It's not I got passed for an attack all the time. They can find all these other different ways. We caught one of these in a sign company recently. We found the dormant payload. Somebody was like, hey, well, aren't you glad we took a look? So this criminal organization, after their second attack, they then attacked a hospital. But people don't realize they still started with a small business first because that's where their capabilities are. So people, attack relative to that. Also, if someone this is another thing that someone taught me, that a successful Russian, if someone, I'm just using that for example, had a successful cyber attack, they can get the same as 16 years pay. It's not personal, it's business. So imagine you told someone who was 19 years old they don't have to work until they're 35. They don't think about anything like that. For them, it is a business. It is, we have money, they don't care anything about that. And they have the tools to do something like this, and they don't have the rules and regulations that we have in place a lot of times. So there's a certain market that goes after people that think that they're too small. What it is there's criminals that are appropriate to that level, and there's no shortage of it. You can find almost like top ransom gangs in the world, and they have people who work up the ranks. They have evil CRMs and all this dark web stuff. They have all these tools, but to kind of get up to where you can hit, when the meatpacking industry got hit or the U.S. Treasury got hit, that's not someone's first attack. They still start somewhere, and they could start with someone that thinks, "Hey, listen, I'm earning my first $100,000. I'm really starting to feel like a business right now. Maybe their first $250,000, maybe it's their first million. To be a $1 million law firm in New Jersey, you have to have, on average, 3 attorneys. It's not a huge thing for someone to do that. That's just on an average. People would do that more or less. That's not a really complicated business, but also if they don't think that their target is there's only 3 of them, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, so I'm really hearing that it's like you really, for anybody that's listening, it's like we have to shift our understanding of really what these cyber criminals, these thieves, how they operate, and what their targets are, right? They're not just going after the big fish all the time. They're actually sort of practicing, and the same way that the same way that like a scaling business, like you take on a particular client at a certain size and certain skill set, and as you get better, you go after a bigger client. The cyber criminals and thieves are doing the same thing.
Exactly. And it's also an unusual industry, and not that you don't invest in cybercrime here, but in the last few years, it's almost grown 15% like clockwork, because they, again, are still, I think a lot of people aren't on that misnomer of I'm too small, and even as those people do that, because what they're also doing is creating an area where people can practice. And I don't want to use practice, but it really comes out some of the worst things you're thinking. Some other by the numbers things we've talked about before, because me, I love my stats and trying to compare them along with the people that can figure out how that affects them. 60%, 3 out of 5 businesses that get hit with a ransomware attack go out of business permanently. That's how serious it is. That's why I really think that security thing can't be understated. You need that base, because if you really think I have this unique thing, I got my business, I've got my off the ground, and the other thing is you can't get, like, if you have less than $10 million, the FBI won't help you until you have more than $10 million, because they moved the goalpost because they had too many incidents. So you're really on an island where your lines of defense are your IT provider and your insurance provider. And if you're your IT provider and you don't know how to work around this stuff, or really like it's like anything. There's the expertise of what we do versus someone trying to be a hobbyist and say, I can do my own IT. It's not the same thing.
Jack, that 60% number that's crazy. Like that's if any business owner out there that's listening that doesn't have any type of anything in place needs to obviously take that number to heart. That's scary. When you look at AI, like, what role is that starting to play in cybersecurity in general, in attacks that are occurring, the fluidity of attacks and things of that nature?
You see it in both sides. You see it in attack and defense, but I think the biggest area that people need to be aware of is on an education part too. So it's being able to identify AI. I just got something that said they're trying to have me pay a traffic court violation, and it's funny. I saw this same image get sent to my phone. I don't know when originally. So they got my number at some point. There's a lot of ways that they can get your phone number, but the first one was really bad done. I think the judge was Jane Doe, and they're cleaning it up. I'm still getting these things. So teaching people how to spot it, and it's what I also call the PayPal principle too. What PayPal realized that just technology was on the filter side and the defense side was too strict. So they have to still have a blend of people and technology to be the most efficient. But even not, most attacks come in through email, right? The majority, the lion's share of it. Even if everyone in the world had best-in-class email filters, which is not what everyone has, but just to make my math easy on it, they still would have 2 trillion malicious emails that get through. So it's around all the AI on the creation on this. So you still, as good as AI can be, you still need people to be educated enough. They don't have to be experts in it, but they need to be at least aware to a certain point. I use my mom. I love my mom. She's likely not watch this because she's not very tech savvy, ironically. But she had someone spoof and impersonate her, trying to teach her stuff. So how did she spot it? How does she look at it? How did someone copy my mother's identity? Like, well, this feels close to home. Let me make sure this doesn't happen, or that we can make sure that everyone else is protected like Knox. AI is this great fun thing for me now. I keep going down this rabbit hole because my favorite conversation is, what do you think it does? What do you want it to do? In the security world too, it does the same thing, because what people want from security is they don't want it to be harder to do their job, right? So if we have all these tools in place and the multi-factor in place and all these things, both AI and technology as a whole, we're looking to not add it so it makes it too hard to do my own job. For me to log into my own information, for me to prove that I am me, is where we see some of this.
Makes sense. And just kind of thinking about, like remote work, right? And we talked a little about like where businesses start. Is there some other things that companies need to keep in mind if they have, let's say, a number of remote employees? They have employees in different states that are working remotely.
Yeah. So you saw that trend happening. Well, over COVID, there was a spike. Like, it was this huge, balloon of attacks went up like 800, 900%, something like that in that bubble of time, because you had some people working from home. My recommendation is same thing that people think, oh, I could work from home, all remote to my, home office, but they don't think that they're sharing the same internet as their son or daughter, and, they're on whatever websites, and it's less controlled. So a home office is not secured unless you secure it. So if you really need to do work in there, we deal a lot in the world of compliance. So let's say you have to follow HIPAA. If you're one of the business owners who looks at things outside of the office, you need to put things like a VPN. You need to have other things where you can kind of create a security bubble within that environment, because now you're giving yourself an area that it gives you, you can breach compliance. Like, your office could have been set up to be completely HIPAA compliant, but then you go and work from the airport and you trust in the free airport Wi-Fi, and you now have made a breach and you're on an unsecured connection. So you were compliant until you put yourself in an environment that wasn't. That still happens with remote employees too. I have a client we work with. They do pension services, and a lot of their employees are remote. They need to, A, they own the devices, but B, they make sure that they have other pieces in place for that, so the devices have limitations, and to have security and the internet traffic that goes in. Because the trouble with the remote workforce is it's not like you're sending out firewalls to every single person. You're trying to figure out, can I do, to get a little technical here, are we doing the VPN? Are we doing a DNS filter to content filter? Are we doing other things to make so they can or can't access certain websites with any data? I can't go on gambling websites with my work laptop, not because we care if someone wants to bet on anything, but the chance of that being somewhere where there could be more malicious activity is higher. Yep. So instead, for a company resource, this computer can't go to any of those websites. Locked down, not allowed. On or off my VPN, it's just completely shut down. So I think make sure that they're company-owned devices, lock them down in a way that you have. This is also the conversation you need to have an IT professional, because you might not see things the same way I do, because I sit and stare and consume this stuff every day.
Yeah.
And from a vulnerability, I can tell you where I would see holes. And this is also, if someone's not ready for us, this is the other thing, Frank, I can still tell someone starting out, here's the baseline, here's the minimum you need to do. We can talk to you when you're ready, but here's the minimum you need to do, because you can't grow a business that's closed, can you?
No.
So,
Yeah.
Zero shutdown businesses that are scaling. None. It's really
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there's also, so I also think there's like two conversations, right? There's sort of the thinking of IT from the external going inward aspect, but then there's also the internal going outward aspect, and specifically thinking about people's habits, their behaviors, and then what happens if they lose a device. If there's some type of environmental impact, I don't know, maybe like a storm or something like that, or they've lost that device. How does the work that you do protect in that case?
Well, I believe most businesses should have an incident response plan, and you actually touch on one of my favorite things in there. I'm part of your plan. I am not your entire plan. If you get hit by a hurricane, you as a business, if you're a CPA or some industries, you're required to have these. Some you might not, but these still are the things that you should do, because what if you have a hurricane, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a way that people can work from home? What if it's a snowstorm? What if it's something less severe, but they still can't get this? Okay, you don't want to create gaps just because. Again, I know at the expense of growing the business, you can't just open up and create these vulnerabilities. Even the internet thing, there's companies we have clients that have backup internet plans, because there are certain providers that will give you can pay for a second internet in the same office. So if Verizon goes down, you can have Optimum. And what they'll do is they'll let you throttle it up or down based off of usage. You can also do things like, hotspots. I also, you'll hear me say this all the time, like, I do not use public Wi-Fi. Even here, I'm not. I think that I was at a hotel in Miami for an event, and I said, hey, do you guys all trust everyone in this room? They're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, do you trust everyone in this hotel? And they're like, huh? I'm like, who here is on the internet? Guess what? If you're on the internet without any other protections in place, you're visible to a criminal in that aspect. So I think that your incident response plan needs to think about these things, but that's where I can help you. But I'm also going to be part of your plan. I also have a template if anyone wants, or if you want it, Ali, I can send it over to you. It's just a baseline for that too, and it goes through a lot of those conditions. What if I have this? What if that? We had a day where a pipe burst in our office, and they said, and we're in one of those office condo complexes. So, but they made the entire building basically, hey, you can't be there while we're repairing this. Well, these situations happen. It's not always a storm, but there are these situations where, guess what? You are being uprooted, but your clients are only empathetic to a certain point, right? If you're providing a service, regardless of what it is, the only time it's hard is like, I can't be like a chiropractor and then say, hey, listen, we're working from home today, so come over and I'll do your adjustment. Like, it doesn't work with every industry.
Yeah.
But you are going to probably need to work from home to reschedule, work with people, get them back in there, and those sorts of things. So it's not completely universal, but there's an application to it. Legal, obviously, there's a huge area where these people are working more than any time. These guys work from anywhere, right? They bring their laptops. They have to trust other internet when they're in an industry that's basically not to necessarily trust. You're supposed to trust your client, have a certain layer there. But, I think that if you're looking to prevent yourself from having a disruption to your business, you need to have a plan for it. So, we talked about this before, like Delta and United, when they had the CrowdStrike thing that went down. It wasn't a cyber attack. It wasn't like a flood. It wasn't any of these things. United went down for a day and said, sorry. Delta went down for a week, lost $500 million, and was trying to figure out who they could point a finger at. The difference was who was prepared and who had a backup. Preparedness really matters in that moment. And same thing, your level of preparedness should match your business. Like, if you're talking to a solo person, you probably don't have an extensive phone tree to call yourself to tell you that you're in that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Let me send myself a reminder to call Verizon. That's right.
Responsible me. Responsible me. Responsible me. There you go. That's how it
I
works.
mean, that's the
find the
question.
mirror so I can point the finger at the right person.
Hey, quick, Jack, you might be able to answer this or not, but like when people, obviously people get cybersecurity insurance, right? Is there anything that, and I know, is there anything that they should keep in mind when they're, I know you're not an insurance agent, but when they're getting a policy and what they want to cover and what due diligence they have to do prior to getting a policy?
I think cyber insurance is also a unique insurance if you don't know, because if you have the right insurance, it helps you with rebuilding reputation, right? So if someone causes a business disruption, if you have to let your clients know that their information may be out there, you see all the people that do the life locks and things. If you have a good cyber insurance policy, it will help you with things that will protect your reputation. Because there is a high likelihood that someday someone will click on the wrong email, but you don't have to let that collapse your business. You have the right things in place even from that. One thing I learned early on, and I think from a policy review, some of the cheaper cyber policies consider ransomware an act of war and they don't cover them. So if you want to talk about one of the biggest risks to your business and you're trying to shop and get the cheapest policy, they'll sell you it, but it's not worth, any more than a roll of toilet paper at that point. But I still think that some of those things. And then you still have to look at, you're more likely to have a cyber attack than you are to have someone drive through your front door. So you really need to think, what is my likelihood of this? And what does it do from preventing and keeping my reputation? So in my matrix of all things I think businesses should have, I do believe I think coaching is one of those things, but I also believe that they have to look at the protection aspect. And under protection, I look at the legal and the insurance. You want to know what providers you need for either one. And you don't want to have the insurance that if you need it, you've just paid for something that's not there on that day. So you don't want to over, you don't want under, but you want to understand those two terms of what is if ransomware specifically is one of those things I would really look at. And the same thing, what does it do to help your reputation out? So you have this, what is it going to help you? Can you put money in marketing and PR and things like that? Because you're going to have to give and rebuild trust. Trust is one of the hardest things. Yeah. And if you have that in place in the right policy, it can help you obtain and build trust, because it's a lot of times when these attacks happen, it's not that they necessarily did something wrong, right? Maybe it was just that, again, there could be both. There's so many ways that an attack can and does happen. We see things like, I saw an attack that went through a chain of people. We had a prospect of ours who faced the same attack as a client of ours, but the client of ours, we got it back up. The prospect was all upset and looking to shop their IT company because they got hit with this thing and did more damage to them because they weren't ready for it. So then they're still trying to figure out, okay, this happened. How do we contact our clients? What do we lose? Does it come out of the business, or did we already account for this with having a policy that makes sense? So cyber insurance is a totally different insurance animal, and don't trust your normal policy on your business insurance is the other thing I would say. Yeah. They give you an umbrella, but it's really not anything.
It's not the same. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I was working on slides for just my own business yesterday, and I'm really proud of this one thing that I put in was that, it says that the price for the service that I'm offering, it's the cheapest that it is today. The most expensive is the day after, something bad happens, like your key employee leaves or your biggest client leaves. And I think the same philosophy and principle can be applied here. Like whatever it costs for to invest in technology or cybersecurity insurance or to invest in your services, today is the cheapest that it will ever be. It'll be the most expensive the day after an attack happens, the day after that trust is lost.
Yeah,
that's great.
And I always think there's this metaphor someone taught me once. You drop a plate on the ground and it breaks, right? Now say you're sorry to the plate. Does it fix the plate? Yeah, you can glue it back together. You could be the best person at a puzzle in the world. Yeah. But the best thing is to try to not have that plate break. Or have something on the ground. So I dropped it and it fell on a pillow. It didn't fall on the ground and shattered, right? So what are the things that you can metaphorically do to have that same situation? Broken trust is, client trust is one of the hardest things. And it doesn't just affect one person, right? All these people out there, houses, their families. It's the dominoes, everyone else that gets involved in all these things. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
And Frank, I can answer any question you ask me. It might not be right, but I can answer any. I don't know how to give a fuck. I'll answer. It just might not be right.
So I got. Are we? Ali, you have any more questions on the cybersecurity side of things?
I mean, I could talk all day with Jack about various different topics on this and so many other things, but I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, no, because like, listen, I'm gonna end up having like anxiety attack if we keep talking about cybersecurity.
Well, can I do you one better, Frank? If you have anyone that reaches out to me that watches this or wants, I'll do a complimentary cybersecurity risk assessment of that business. It's something that we usually charge for, but if it comes from you, I'll waive that. The only catch is they have to sit down and talk to me about the findings of it too. So I think that's pretty easy looking at it. So instead of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'll let them know where they're at and I'll give them that gap of where they can be. Whether they're working with us or not, I like to give people 2 to 3 things they can walk away and improve.
That's appreciated. Awesome. I feel the same way. But hey, so getting back to like the operational side, right? Like when you're working, like helping organizations run a little bit more efficiently, right? So JustWorks, we help organizations on HR, benefits, payroll, compliance, all that fun stuff. Onboarding is extremely important when a new employee comes on. Can you talk to us a little bit about what, just from the IT side, what good onboarding looks like and how you can kind of help start with a more positive experience for the employee?
I have an exercise I like to do that I call stock and roll. It was an idea that take stock in your business and figure things out. I was trying to talk to business owners about, hey, if you were to hire me, Ali, you got to hire me. I'm now working for your business. How do you give me the ropes? How do I learn your business in the beginning? And then you can kind of see where they, like, is this a house of cards they put together, or do they have processes? Hey, listen, Jack, when you start here, the first thing is we set you up in this CRM. We have this training that's going to do. The training isn't only videos because you'll fall asleep like anyone else. It's like trying to get through OSHA. It's really challenging stuff. So we do a blend of this and this. And I think that, doing that and testing it and seeing how people will sell that part, you kind of get an idea. Even the HR, payroll, we get what is their. One of the things I like about the book that 𝗲𝗵𝗶𝘀 revisited was the same thing as, even if you're not a franchise, do things in a way that you can replicate that. Also figure out that when you're doing things with businesses, I was a computer programmer way back in the day, so I think a lot of things in conditional ways. Maybe you think about what tree and SMBs are there. Because if you we had a client that they replaced the CEO. Great book. When you replace the CEO, that's a whole different onboard. So onboards are different to the levels and access for us, but same thing. Do you have clear guidelines? The goal of the onboard is to have someone feel as quickly acclimated that they don't want to feel like it's a transaction, but they have to understand that what's my learning curve and where's my safety net. So you don't want to coddle someone, but you want someone to know the resource they have for them to get up to speed. I think when I was on board with my current company, my boss did a great job because I understood my guardrails, how I was getting into it, how I was learning. And years later, I've grown tremendously because of how that started. I knew that this is when I get my PSA. This is how I get this. And, not to talk too much on the tools, but there was a clear outline for me too. What days and what I was doing, how I was doing this. Even things like, talking about an HR payroll, I knew when and how I was getting paid. That's important to people, right?
Yeah.
At the end if money is not the most important thing to you, that's great, but you still need to come home. Like, I still have a 2-year-old. I need to make sure that he gets to eat. So I need to know that's in place, right? So we're even looking at with a company that we have in finance, just making it so there's a standardization of the hardware too. Then it makes it even less. We don't want to have too much thought in it. We don't want variations on environments, right? We want, this is how we do things, but to the reason that it's the benefit of the business and the person, because it makes it continuity for how they start. Always relative to the position. And I think, like a lot of things, stress test the system every so often, right? You can't just say, one of my least favorite things, and I think you guys will both agree to this, is someone saying, well, that's how we've always done it. So I think when it comes to onboarding, a good conversation might be, hey, listen, Ali, when was the last time you looked at your onboarding process? Is there anything that you got some feedback from people that didn't go well? Because then you can look at tweaking the piece or part instead of just breaking the whole thing down and saying, all right, well, now I'm getting to understand why this didn't work. why did this person have, and you also don't want to do it at the loss, but we know that's hard getting good people, and it's even harder retaining good people. And you don't want to have to start with a bad, well, how did it go in the beginning? If the movie started terribly, do you really think it's going to be a good movie at the end of it? You're like, what did I sign up for? What am I watching?
Yeah.
If you watch Shark Side of the Moon, it doesn't get any better for the entire movie. It's probably the single worst movie of all time.
You said Shark Side of the Moon?
Shark Side of the Moon.
Did you finish it?
I had a friend watch it because I thought it'd be a fun torture bet thing, but then I watched it because friends like misery, right?
Yeah.
Loves company. But if it starts out bad, there's no part that I didn't think it was going to get better, and it didn't. But you can't do that with an employee. You can't do that with a coworker, and you can't do that with someone's livelihood. I could do that in some 2 mindless hours that I'll never get back, but you can't do it other places. It doesn't translate to other things. So, revisiting, even with technology. The reason that we love doing quarterly business reviews, they're not taking a task reviews with like fives. And we can sit down as often as someone wants to sit down with me because, as you know, I love talking about this stuff. I love that once we get that cybersecurity foundation in place, we keep revisiting that. But I love making sure that the technology is always serving the business in a way that you can be simple, you're authentic, you're not lost in the technology, but revisit it. And if you see, if someone goes to this event here, that we have clients that are here that are attorneys, if they see something cool that's learned that builds on their technology, I want to learn it. I want to see how it works. Does it solve and make something easier for them? I'm of the fun age where I also had a typewriter as a kid. But there's a reason that I'm not using a typewriter right now and sending you guys letters to do this. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember is sometimes the technology and the rate and the pace at which it advances is a reason to revisit it alone. Just because what you're paying today, right? You might have paid. I remember, the cost of a Salesforce or even just the cost of having a computer, right, was often very large investment for a lot of businesses. And now, as the economies of scale has grown, as technology has improved, the cost for that has gone down. So really, and we're able to do things so much faster now, right? In that we've shortened the time to value for a lot of the technology and the services.
Great way to say that.
Yeah. It's not my phrase. I don't know. I don't remember where I heard it, but it was a good one. So
I think it's a great one. I might figure that one out so we can quote that one. And I also think, I've been saying this a lot lately too. I think the goal is to keep the main thing. And whether it be your onboarding process, if I'm a chiropractor, I want to be a chiropractor. I want to be serving people. I am passionate about the health and the wellness that I provide to people. I don't get up and wake up in the morning and go, man, I love cyber insurance. Ooh, this stuff's great. But if you do those things, you can keep the main thing, right? And same thing, you're not trying to be maybe you're excited that you have employees, but you're not really excited about payroll necessarily. It's a byproduct of the other things we have, right? But you're not ooh, today's the day they do that direct deposit. Everyone's getting paid. You want it to work. You need it fundamentally to work, but you want to still be able to see people do that main thing. The business needs to keep that focus too.
Yeah.
Because when you get bogged down in the other parts, then you're not doing what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it.
Listen, if Ali didn't drink from his own fountain here and say listen, he wants to help with people with SOPs, the process of that, and he spends all his day on things that are mindless tasks because he doesn't have SOPs, but then he's still not serving people and helping them get more out.
Correct.
There is zero liberation when you are not also at that point.
Yeah, and that's literally what I'm sitting down and doing all the time. Is okay, how can I duplicate myself? Not necessarily through AI, but just through how can I make this process more streamlined? How can I make this process more straightforward if I were going to hire someone, right? And I'm already thinking about what would be the technological needs, right? The thing you said about you should sort of have a secure bubble, even if you're working from home, which is where I work from, pretty much most of the time, right? Somebody could just be outside or at the dentist's office next door, skimming off the Wi-Fi or something like that. Now my network isn't secure. So those are things that I would that I should be thinking about. So I'll definitely give you a call on that.
I try not to share too much doom, but there's definitely a certain degree of it that needs to be out there.
Yeah. Well, it's like
Again,
you
I
want to
think
be
that's my
aware.
If anyone wants to know.
Yeah, you want to be aware, but not consumed with the thoughts of how things could go wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know we're kind of come up on time, Jack. Tell us a little bit about you kind of gave us a ton of information, but a little bit about the services that overall services that you guys provide, a little bit about yourself and how everyone can and should reach you.
So at our core, we're a cybersecurity and support company, and I think when you do that and you keep the business operational, that is how we were built and started. And I think one thing I really loved about this company, because I approached this company to ask them to work with me. I always heard the story a million times. Just going to hear it one more time. I called the owner and said, I don't know if you're hiring, but I'd love to apply for the job. And he goes, I wasn't, but sure. And because I thought he built a business with integrity. He wanted to be proactive. He wanted to be someone's partner in technology. And I thought he had a better approach to it. And that's what I liked about what he did. The core is still keeping someone safe. But then from having those, intentional conversations with people, we get to sit side by side and actually help them use technology as a growth and scaling tool and strategy. That's different than, like you said, a lot of people think IT, I call it IT, my Outlook isn't working. And that's absolutely part of it. If technology worked, I wouldn't have a job. There's a lot of that going on too. But so that's what I think. How you can reach me, my email is Watkinson, WATKINSON at outsourcemyit.com. And because I'm a lunatic, I'll give you my cell too. It's 973-852-3010. Yes, if you text me at some unholy hour, I probably will text you back because my work cell is the only thing that goes past my do not disturb. So you can reach me anywhere. And our website is outsourcemyit.com. So if you want to see if we support your industry or if you have questions, I love questions because if I'm not the right person, I can always try and at least get someone to the right piece of puzzle and try and say, hey, let's try and find a solution.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Cool. That was great.
Yeah. Well, again, Jack, thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. I know with the convention and everything, I appreciate you just, carving that out for us. And I just wish you a lot of people will come up to your booth after this. Well, first you get to eat, and then a bunch of people will come up to you after.
I've had a plate that's been sitting there for an hour. It's great. I'll get to it.
Well, I remember those convention days, those exhibit days.
Thank you guys again, and let's keep in contact, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, take care, everybody, and we'll see you. We'll see you next week.
Yep.